So I'm excited to be here. My name is Ed Ramos. I am director of the digital clinical trials at the Digital Trial Center here at Scripps Research. Excited to share a little bit of some of the studies that we have going on, in particular, the prediction of glycemic response study or progress. This is one of our efforts coming out of the newly formed Digital Trial Center here at Scripps Research, really falling in the context of precision nutrition. I'm excited to share some of our details of where we are and as we get ready to launch this. So just a quick level set with regards to diabetes, to prediabetes. This is probably not foreign to anyone in the audience, but a reminder of the staggering statistics that we face as a nation with regards to this particular disorder. So over 100 million adults in the United States living with prediabetes or diabetes. Specifically, that's 4 in 10 adults that are just kind of creeping up to that threshold of being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and 1 in 7 that already have. So clearly, the impact and the public health concern, beyond concern of type 2 diabetes, is ever present across the United States. And so again, this is just a quick primer on what it is we're referring to with respect to this particular disease. Obviously, type 2 diabetes is directly related to the amount of sugar present in blood. So as food enters your body after you eat and is digested, glucose then triggers the production of insulin from the pancreas. And it's really the job of the insulin to carry that glucose to cells to use for energy, but it's the dysfunction of that process that's really associated and the telltale sign of type 2 diabetes, leaving the sugar molecules in the bloodstream. And so ultimately, the potential effects, long-term effects, and in some instances, short-term effects of type 2 diabetes can lead to things like eye disease, cardiac-related events, kidney disease, nerve damage, skin infections. So it's not just the challenge of clearing glucose from the blood, but all these potentially downstream related impacts in terms of diseases and disorders that need to be addressed as a patient of this particular disease. And so the bright spot with regards to type 2 diabetes is really our ability to potentially prevent its onset. And in some cases, perhaps many cases, potentially reverse type 2 diabetes or at least decrease its severity. And so typically the clinical advice and the public health messaging really comes around a number of different buckets. And I just have picked a few here in terms of being more active, so increasing that physical activity, increasing exercise, obviously consulting your health professional and being able to control weight, as obesity and being overweight is a clear comorbidity of type 2 diabetes. And then, of course, eating healthy, what you eat and when you eat, being of primary importance in terms of controlling those glycemic responses to different nutritional intakes. But as we kind of venture into this world of personalized medicine and precision medicine, much of the veering away from the one-size-fits-all paradigm is true for precision nutrition. So how often do I, as an individual, need to exercise, which may be very different than the population on average or sub cohorts of the population, the general population. What ultimately are the potential long-term impacts that an individual may face with regards to having onset of type 2 diabetes? How much weight should I lose if obesity or being overweight is of concern and a contributing factor to disease, to type 2 diabetes? And then, of course, as I mentioned in the previous slide, eating healthy is an extremely general guidance. And so what kind of food should I eat as an individual? Are there certain types of food that I should potentially avoid? And of course, putting all of these into a different context is really what drives this idea and this philosophy behind precision nutrition. And so, as we think about all those different factors, it really drives us to develop approaches that broaden this investigative lens in terms of teasing out what those variables are that are driving onset of type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, insulin resistance, and related. And so in 2008, when I really started ramping up my own independent research, we were coming off the heels of sequencing of the human genome, and genome-wide association studies were such a primary tool for being able to identify these mutations across the genome that were associated with individuals that progressed to type 2 diabetes compared to controls. Unfortunately, type 2 diabetes really falls under this common complex disease category. And so there weren't silver bullets that were appearing in the genome-wide association studies that were applicable across the entire population. So most certainly, genetics and genomics has provided significant insight into onset of diabetes. However, it most certainly can't explain every single case that is presented in terms of onset of the disease. And so at that time, we were really trying to get a sense of what are some of these additional quote unquote environmental factors, with environmental there being used as a very large umbrella. And we teamed up with a group out of MD Anderson that was running a mono Mexican American cohort study, very much an epidemiological study that really focused on leveraging validated survey instruments that was looking at things like acculturation and food behaviors and psychosocial and other behavioral factors, socioeconomic status, different aspects of demographics, and really layering that on as a potential for an understanding of additional elements beyond genetics, beyond genomics that could potentially be contributing. And so that was relatively early on in the G by E, the genes by environment type of approach. And now, fast forwarding to 2021, we have this explosion of digital health technologies and digital measures that can also provide those additional layers of data and information. This is, I think, a great schematic that I borrowed from the playbook that, as a side note, is an excellent utility for those that are interested in constructing clinical and public health related studies in the digital medicine space. But this is what I refer to as the iceberg schematic, in that the parts of the iceberg that are above sea level really speak to more of these episodic captures of data, whereas there is so much more information that lies beneath sea level, and that really kind of are analogous to all these quote unquote invisible data points that really fill in these gaps in between episodes of data capture. And so this is really where digital health technologies and wearables and sensors and remote monitoring can really help fill the gap and provide those additional layers of information, and allow for a kind of multi-perspective on what's potentially contributing to type 2 diabetes. And all of that feeds into the design and ultimately launch of Progress, again, the prediction of glycemic response study that is aimed at developing a predictive model of individual glucose response with respect to different types of food that an individual eats. And an extremely important aspect of the study is recruiting those individuals that both have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes as well as age-matched controls. So Progress, this has been a study design lockstep with our partner Tempus, who's sponsoring the project. And one of our couple of studies that have already been launched from the Digital Trust Center here at Scripps Research. And just to step through an overview of what the participant sees and give you a sense of what the study design is, I would be remiss without mentioning the seminal work that has been done out of the UK Spectre Lab with the Predict and follow-on Predict 2 studies. Excellent papers and contributions to the literature in the last couple years with regards to their observations. I think progress will continue to add on to those efforts, especially as we look at those individuals with type 2 diabetes. But I also want to highlight the fact that while there's a clear biomedical kind of research component to our interests and to our expected observations, there is a significant amount for us to be able to learn just in terms of workflow. Progress is really meant to embrace a true all digital remote sightless trial in which all of the activities are carried out by the participant with some facilitated guidance by study coordinators, but still done out of the clinic and still carried out in the home of the participants. And so, in terms of a participant workflow, the register and really what is ultimately an e-consent are all facilitated by the My Data Helps platform, which is a research platform developed by the Care Evolution, a company that we've been partnering with on a number of our studies. The participant would then be presented with a number of different baseline surveys and lifestyle surveys. And then again, leveraging the power of the My Data Helps platform that allows for electronic health record connection, either through Apple Health Records or through direct connection to patient portals of providers that have connected through the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource API, of which there are numerous endpoints nationally. And so the workflow, in addition to onboarding and surveys and the EHR connection, which obviously is critical for the longitudinal aspect, as you can see in the top part of the slide, where we kind of lay out the timing of events for a participant. And so the first month for a participant is really where the predominant active tasks are, which not only include onboarding, but ultimately also include a bio kit. So this collection of biosamples, again, done by the participant at home. So it's saliva collection that would provide for genomics assays, stool sample for microbiome, and then using a drawbridge device for a self-administered collection of blood for HbA1c confirmation. Once that bio kit is completed and samples are returned back, participants are then presented with a gluco kit. And the gluco kit will contain a Fitbit for biometrics, really trying to get at an understanding of influences from heart rate and physical activity and sleep and so on. We've also partnered with Dexcom, who has contributed their G6 continuous glucose monitors, which will be worn by the participants for a full 10 days. And then during that 10-day tracking of their glucose, they will also be capturing a food diary that kind of speaks, obviously, to their nutritional intake. And then ultimately, in the 3-year longitudinal arm of the study is very much done passively. So the EHR connection will continue to pull new observations and new diagnoses and potentially speak to health outcomes in those out years, as well as any connected devices like the Fitbit will be able to provide data as consented to by the participant, and ultimately confirming HbA1c status at an annual cadence. So in terms of specifics and a little bit more insight into the activities of the participant, which will be incentivized, especially given the amount of activities that they're expected to do. So again, 30 days of really kind of active task integration with the study and connecting with study coordinators, and of course the 10-day kind of intense data tracking period, which would include, again, the glucose monitoring as well as the capture of nutrition. All of this, and speaking again to my earlier point of not only learning about the biomedical research questions that we can potentially ask, but also operationally, what can we learn in terms of motivating a participant through such an intense study. So we're doing things like implementing a variety of different incentive models, using a point system, again, to kind of carry them through each of the different tasks that they have to complete in that early part, active part of the study. In terms of information returned back to the participants, obviously they'll have an opportunity to glean their blood sugar based on the biosample that they provide. Within the My Data Helps app, there is a number of data visualizations in terms of the different data types that they are sharing, which include biometrics that are being pulled from Fitbit, as well as the EHR data that they were able to have full transparency in terms of being able to see within the My Data Helps app the same data that's being shared with researchers. And so ultimately, we did a quick dry run over the summer just to get a sense of logistics and what the data would potentially look like. Giorgio Quer here at Scripps Research, who's done an amazing job in a variety of different research studies, most recently some of our COVID-19 work with the Detect study that is also part of the Spectrum series talks that are available to the audience. Showing here some potential insight into how we can start breaking down our analysis of the glucose spikes that we see in relation to the different macronutrients that are recorded through the food diary, and then obviously ultimately trying to layer on additional information to really get at that predictive model, and the added benefit of being able to look at the out years for potentially an understanding of health outcomes with regards to the different modeling that we can glean from all the data that we'll be layering on is extremely exciting, and I think we'll have will provide important inroads into precision nutrition, and really potentially step one of many in terms of scaling the study out to a broader effort. So for those that are interested in kind of keeping track of our efforts with this particular study, recently launched a press release. There is a landing page for capture of interested parties. We're excited to get this study off the ground as another effort coming out of the Digital Trial Center. Lots to learn on so many different levels, and excited to be able to contribute to the space of type 2 diabetes and precision nutrition at large. So I just want to thank again to the organizers for an opportunity to present our work. Hope to be back on findings and talk about our successes in this particular